I'm Jessica Morgan, 28, and I just discovered that my own family has been stealing from me for years, $200,000 that my grandmother left specifically for me. They thought they'd gotten away with it, until Grandma's final surprise was revealed at what was supposed to be a routine family dinner. My entire world collapsed that night, but what happened next would change our family forever in ways none of us could have imagined. Before I dive into this wild family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy family revenge stories that deliver sweet justice. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how my grandmother, even from beyond the grave, made sure karma caught up to everyone who betrayed me. Growing up in the suburbs of Boston, I always thought I had the quintessential American family. My father, Richard Morgan, worked as a successful investment banker, while my mother, Diana, managed our household with precision and grace. I had two siblings, my older brother, Eric, who was the golden child following in Dad's financial footsteps, and my younger sister, Melissa, the family darling pursuing her dreams in medical school. Then there was Grandma Eleanor, my father's mother, a fierce, independent woman who had built her own real estate empire after Grandpa died young. Our family gatherings were picture-perfect from the outside, holiday celebrations in our spacious colonial home, summer vacations to Martha's Vineyard, and weekly Sunday dinners where everyone shared their accomplishments. But beneath that polished veneer, there were always undercurrents of tension that I couldn't quite name as a child. Grandma Eleanor was always different with me. While my parents clearly favored my siblings, Eric for his business acumen and Melissa for her academic brilliance, Grandma saw something in me that others didn't. "You've got a creative spirit, Jessica," she'd tell me during our private conversations in her garden. "Don't let anyone dim your light." She encouraged my passion for photography when my parents dismissed it as a hobby rather than a legitimate career path. By the time I reached high school, the family dynamics were firmly established. Eric was being groomed to join my father's firm, Melissa was the academic star with perfect grades, and I was, well, the disappointment. My grades were good but not stellar, my interests artistic rather than practical. When I announced I wanted to study photography in college instead of business or medicine, my parents barely concealed their disappointment. "Art won't pay the bills, Jessica," my father would say dismissively. "You need to think about your future more practically." Only Grandma Eleanor supported my decision. "Follow your heart," she said, slipping me a check for $5,000 to buy my first professional camera equipment. "I believe in you." College was liberating. Away from my family's constant comparisons, I flourished. My photography professors praised my unique perspective, and I started gaining recognition in student exhibitions. Meanwhile, Grandma Eleanor remained my biggest cheerleader, calling weekly to hear about my projects and sending small financial gifts when I needed equipment or workshop fees. What I didn't know then was that my relationship with Grandma Eleanor had created deep resentment within my family. My parents and siblings saw her special attention to me as a threat to their own inheritance expectations. They couldn't understand why she favored the underachiever of the family over the obviously successful ones. During my senior year of college, Grandma Eleanor's health began to decline. She was diagnosed with lung cancer, and the prognosis wasn't good. I took a semester off to help care for her, spending days at her bedside while my family members made only brief, obligation-filled visits between their important commitments. "They've always been like this," Grandma confided to me during one of our quiet afternoons together. "So focused on money and status. Your grandfather and I worked hard for what we have, but we never forgot what truly matters." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll never lose yourself chasing what others think is important." I promised, not realizing how prophetic her words would become. Grandma Eleanor passed away peacefully 3 months later. The funeral was a grand affair, my father spared no expense to maintain appearances, but it felt hollow. While my family networked with business associates even at the reception, I sat alone with my grief, clutching the vintage camera pendant Grandma had given me on her final day. "Remember me when you capture beautiful moments," she had whispered. The reading of the will was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. I expected little, knowing my father had always managed Grandma's finances in her later years. To my surprise, the family attorney, Mr. Winters, contacted me personally before the official reading. "Your grandmother left specific instructions to speak with you privately," he explained, his voice careful over the phone. "She wanted you to know that she's arranged something special for your future." Hope and confusion mingled as I met with Mr. Winters the next day. He explained that Grandma Eleanor had established a trust fund specifically for my photography career, $200,000 to be released on my 25th birthday, just 8 months away. "She believed in your talent," Mr. Winters said kindly. "She wanted to ensure you could pursue your passion without financial constraints." I was overwhelmed with gratitude and love for my grandmother. This gift would change everything. I could open my own studio, travel for photography projects, build the career I'd always dreamed of. Mr. Winters advised me to keep this information private until the official will reading, as the rest of the estate would be distributed differently. "Your grandmother was very strategic about her decisions," he said cryptically. Naively, I agreed, not realizing that this secrecy would create the perfect opportunity for what was to come. At the official will reading, something strange happened. Mr. Winters seemed uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze as he announced that Grandma Eleanor's estate would be divided equally among my father, Eric, and Melissa. I was mentioned only as a recipient of her personal jewelry collection and photography equipment. Confused, I approached Mr. Winters afterward. "What about the trust fund?" I whispered. His face paled. "I'm sorry, Jessica. There's been a change. Your father presented an amendment to the will, signed by your grandmother, redirecting those funds to a family investment account. It was all legal, there's nothing I can do." I felt sick. Something wasn't right, but I had no proof, no way to challenge what had happened. When I confronted my father, his explanation was smooth, practiced. "Your grandmother realized that you needed guidance with such a large sum," he said condescendingly. "She trusted me to manage it for your benefit. It's for your own good, Jessica. You've never been good with financial decisions." Devastated but outnumbered, I retreated. For the next 3 years, I struggled to build my photography business with minimal resources, taking on side jobs to pay the bills while watching my siblings thrive with their significant inheritances. My father claimed to be investing my portion, but whenever I asked for funds for my business, there were always excuses and delays. What my family didn't know was that Grandma Eleanor had given me more than just jewelry and cameras. She had also given me her fierce determination and a deep sense of justice that was about to be awakened in ways none of them could anticipate. The truth began unraveling on an ordinary Tuesday, 3 years after Grandma Eleanor's death. I had been invited to my parents' home for dinner, a rare occurrence since I had moved out and distanced myself from their constant disappointment. The invitation came from my mother, who claimed they wanted to reconnect and discuss some family matters. I arrived with my guard up, camera bag slung over my shoulder out of habit. My photography business was finally gaining traction, though the journey had been far harder than necessary without the funds Grandma Eleanor had intended for me. I'd been living in a tiny studio apartment, working extra jobs bartending and doing wedding photography gigs I hated just to make ends meet. The family home looked the same as always, immaculate and cold. My mother greeted me with an air kiss, careful not to smudge her makeup, while my father barely looked up from his financial papers in the study. Eric had brought his new fiancée, Amanda, a polished investment banker with a Harvard MBA, while Melissa was showing off her new luxury watch, a gift to myself for finishing my first year of medical residency, she announced proudly. During dinner, the conversation revolved around Eric's upcoming promotion, Melissa's prestigious research opportunity, and my parents' plans to purchase a vacation home in the Hamptons. No one asked about my photography or my life. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate and wondering why I had been invited at all. Jessica, my father finally addressed me directly, swirling his expensive Cabernet, we've been thinking about your situation. My mother nodded with practiced concern. We worry about your future, dear. That little photography business of yours doesn't seem to be taking off as you'd hoped. Actually, I just booked my first gallery showing, I replied, trying to keep the defensiveness from my voice. And I've been commissioned for. That's nice, my father interrupted, but let's be realistic. You're approaching 30 with no substantial savings, no property investments, no retirement plan. We've decided it's time for you to join the family business. I nearly choked on my water. The family business? Dad, I'm a photographer. I know nothing about investment banking. You can learn, he dismissed my concerns with a wave. We have an entry-level position that would be perfect. Eric can mentor you. Eric smiled condescendingly. It's really for the best, Jess. Photography is fine as a hobby, but it's time to grow up. I felt my face burning with frustration. I don't need to grow up. My business is finally gaining momentum. If I had received the trust fund Grandma Eleanor set up for me, I'd be much further along by now. The room fell silent. My mother's smile froze, my father's hand tightened around his wine glass, and Eric and Melissa exchanged quick glances. Jessica, my father's voice had dropped dangerously low, we've been through this. That money was reallocated according to your grandmother's final wishes. She recognized that you weren't ready for that kind of responsibility. Something in his tone triggered a memory, Grandma Eleanor's voice during one of our last conversations. Richard has always been too smooth when he's lying. Watch his left eyebrow, it twitches just slightly. Your grandfather noticed it first. I looked directly at my father and saw it, the almost imperceptible twitch of his left eyebrow. You're lying, I said quietly, the certainty washing over me like a cold wave. Grandma never changed her mind about that trust fund. My father's face hardened. That's enough, Jessica. This fantasy you've created about your grandmother favoring you needs to stop. Before I could respond, I heard the doorbell. My mother looked confused, they weren't expecting anyone else. Our longtime housekeeper, Maria, appeared at the dining room doorway moments later. Mr. Morgan, there's a gentleman here to see Miss Jessica. A Mr. Winters. My heart pounded as the family attorney stepped into our dining room, briefcase in hand. I hadn't spoken to him since that devastating will reading 3 years ago. I apologize for interrupting your dinner, Mr. Winters said formally, but this matter couldn't wait. My father stood abruptly. Whatever business you have with Jessica can be discussed with me first, as the head of this family. Mr. Winters met my father's gaze steadily. I'm afraid that's not possible, Richard. My business is specifically with Jessica, and it concerns Eleanor Morgan's estate. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother's hand fluttered nervously to her pearl necklace, while Eric and Melissa exchanged confused looks. Perhaps we could speak privately? Mr. Winters suggested, looking at me. Anything you have to say can be said in front of everyone, my father insisted, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Mr. Winters hesitated, then nodded. As you wish. He placed his briefcase on the table and extracted a sealed envelope. Jessica, 3 years ago your grandmother left explicit instructions with me. This letter was to be delivered to you today, on the exact 3rd anniversary of the original will reading. My hands trembled as I took the envelope, which felt heavy and official. The front simply read for Jessica Morgan, to be opened 3 years after my passing in Grandma Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. What is this? My father demanded. Why wasn't I informed about this letter? Eleanor's instructions were quite clear, Mr. Winters replied calmly. And as her legal representative, I'm bound to follow them. With everyone's eyes on me, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and what appeared to be a small memory card. I unfolded the letter, my grandmother's familiar script bringing tears to my eyes. My dearest Jessica. If you're reading this, then 3 years have passed since my death, and I fear my suspicions have proven correct. By now, your father has likely manipulated my will and taken control of the $200,000 I set aside for your photography dreams. I've known Richard too long not to anticipate his actions. What your father doesn't know is that I prepared for this. The memory card enclosed contains video evidence of our private conversations about your trust fund, as well as video of Richard's visit to me in the hospital where he pressured me to sign documents I never read, documents I'm certain contained the falsified amendment to my will. I had a security system installed in my hospital room after your grandfather experienced something similar with Richard years ago. The camera was hidden in the digital photo frame you gave me, the one displaying your beautiful photographs that brought me such joy in my final days. Take this evidence to Stanley Winters. He has additional documentation in his possession and instructions on how to proceed legally against your father and anyone else involved in this deception. Remember what I told you about family, Jessica. True family lifts you up, they don't tear you down or steal what's rightfully yours. It's time for the truth to come to light. I love you always. Grandma Eleanor. My hands were shaking as I finished reading. Looking up, I met my father's eyes, which had gone from angry to frightened as he watched the color drain from my face. What does it say? Melissa demanded, breaking the silence. I couldn't speak. I simply handed the letter to Mr. Winters, who read it silently before addressing my father. Richard, I think it's time we discuss the real terms of Eleanor Morgan's will, and the evidence she left behind. The dining room erupted into chaos. My father lunged for the letter in Mr. Winters' hands, his face contorted with rage and fear. This is preposterous. A senile old woman's delusions, he shouted, but the tremble in his voice betrayed him. You can't possibly believe this nonsense, Stanley. We've known each other for 20 years. Mr. Winters stepped back calmly, placing the letter back in his briefcase. Which is precisely why Eleanor trusted me with this contingency plan, Richard. She knew your history all too well. My mother's perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth. Richard, what is he talking about? What have you done? Eric stood up, his businessman persona taking over. Everyone needs to calm down. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for all of this. Dad wouldn't. Dad absolutely would, I interrupted, finding my voice at last. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, clear anger that sharpened my thoughts. And I think you knew about it, Eric. Maybe even helped him. Eric's face flushed. That's a serious accusation, Jessica. Be careful what you say. Melissa, who had remained uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke up. I want to see this supposed video evidence, she said, eyeing the memory card I still held. Mr. Winters nodded. That would be appropriate. Do you have a computer available? My father moved toward the doorway. This meeting is over. Stanley, I'll have your license for this. And Jessica, he turned to me, his expression hardening, you've always been too gullible, too emotional. Your grandmother was confused and manipulated in her final days, probably by you. That's enough, Richard, Mr. Winters said firmly. You should know that I've already filed copies of all evidence with my firm's partners and with the district attorney's office. This isn't going away. My father froze, his face ashen. For the first time in my life, I saw raw fear in his eyes. I stood up, clutching Grandma Eleanor's letter and memory card. Let's watch the video right now. Dad's laptop is in his study. Despite my father's protests, we moved to his study where Mr. Winters inserted the memory card into the computer. The first video began playing, Grandma Eleanor in her hospital bed, with me sitting beside her as she clearly detailed her wishes for the trust fund. The full amount, $200,000, is to go to Jessica upon my death. I've seen her business plan, Stanley, and it's sound. She has my entrepreneurial spirit, not the greed that's consumed Richard. The next video showed my father entering her room after I had left. The timestamp indicated it was just days before her death, when she was heavily medicated. The audio captured everything, my father pressuring her to sign documents, holding her frail hand with the pen, guiding it across the pages as she drifted in and out of consciousness. "Just sign here, Mother. It's just some routine updates to your will, making things clearer for everyone." The video was damning. My father couldn't meet anyone's eyes as it played. When it finished, the silence in the room was deafening. "There's more," Mr. Winters said quietly. Eleanor suspected this might happen because it wasn't the first time. He pulled out another document from his briefcase. "This is a sworn affidavit from Eleanor regarding similar actions Richard took with Harold Morgan's will, your grandfather, Jessica. According to Eleanor, Richard manipulated Harold's will in much the same way, diverting funds that were meant to be distributed among several family members." My mother gasped, turning to my father. "Is this true? Did you do this to your own father too?" My father's composure cracked entirely. "You've never complained about the lifestyle those decisions provided, Diana. The vacation home in Aspen, the country club memberships, Melissa's medical school with no student loans, where did you think all that came from? My banking salary alone?" "So you admit it," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You stole from your own parents, and then from me. I protected this family's legacy," he shouted. "Your grandmother would have wasted a small fortune on your little photography hobby. I invested that money, grew it for all of us." "It wasn't yours to take," Mr. Winters stated flatly. "And the law is quite clear on that point." Eric, ever the pragmatist, stepped in. "What exactly are you planning to do with this information, Jessica? Surely we can handle this as a family without involving outsiders." I looked at my brother, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. His concern wasn't for me or for the wrong that had been done, it was for the family reputation, for his own career prospects. "Did you know?" I asked him directly. "About the falsified amendment?" Eric hesitated just a second too long before saying, "Of course not." "Another lie." Mr. Winters cleared his throat. Eleanor's instructions were explicit. Jessica has the legal right to pursue criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse, in addition to a civil suit to recover the misappropriated funds, with interest. Criminal charges? My mother's voice rose to a near shriek. Richard could go to prison. Our family name would be ruined. You should have thought about that before stealing $200,000 from your own daughter, I replied. Melissa, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly stood up. I didn't know about any of this, she said, her voice shaking. I swear, Jessica, if I had known. I wanted to believe her, but years of being the family outsider had taught me caution. Your medical school tuition was paid with my money, Melissa. Are you prepared to make that right? Her face crumpled. I'm still hundreds of thousands in debt from living expenses and residency costs. I don't have that kind of money. None of this is necessary, my father interjected, shifting to negotiation mode. Jessica, be reasonable. I can transfer $200,000 to you tomorrow. We can forget this unfortunate misunderstanding and move forward as a family. $200,000 3 years ago is not the same as $200,000 now, Mr. Winters pointed out. And there's the matter of Eleanor's explicit wishes being violated, plus the emotional damage done. I looked around at my family, my father calculating even now, my mother concerned only with appearances, Eric angry that his carefully constructed world was threatened, and Melissa confused and afraid. These people had watched me struggle for years while sitting on money that was rightfully mine. They had discouraged my dreams while using my inheritance to fund their own. This isn't just about the money, I said finally. This is about years of lies, manipulation, and disrespect. Grandma Eleanor believed in me when none of you did. She wanted to protect me from exactly what happened, and now, even from beyond the grave, she's done just that. My father's expression darkened. You ungrateful. I believe we're done here for tonight, Mr. Winters interrupted. Jessica, shall we continue this discussion at my office tomorrow morning to review your legal options? I nodded, gathering my belongings. As I headed for the door, I turned back one last time to face my family. Grandma always said the truth has a way of coming to light. I guess she made sure of it. The next morning, I arrived at Mr. Winters' downtown office with a strange mix of determination and heartbreak. The weight of my family's betrayal sat heavy on my shoulders, but Grandma Eleanor's posthumous support gave me strength. The office was housed in an elegant brownstone, with rich mahogany furniture and shelves lined with leather-bound law books, a stark contrast to my tiny apartment with its second-hand furniture. Good morning, Jessica, Mr. Winters greeted me, ushering me into a conference room where a younger attorney was already seated. This is Amara Chen, our firm's litigation specialist. She'll be handling your case if you decide to proceed. Amara shook my hand firmly. I've reviewed the evidence overnight. It's one of the more clear-cut cases of will fraud I've seen, but that doesn't mean it won't get messy. How messy? I asked, setting my bag down and taking a seat. Mr. Winters sighed. Your father called me 6 times last night. First with threats, then with increasingly desperate settlement offers. He's already retained Sullivan and Barker. They're an aggressive firm that specializes in family wealth disputes. That was fast, I commented. Money moves quickly when it's threatened, Amara noted dryly. We should discuss your options before making any decisions. For the next hour, they outlined 3 potential paths: a criminal complaint that could result in charges of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. A civil lawsuit to recover the misappropriated funds plus damages, or a private settlement with legally binding terms. The criminal route would likely result in the most severe consequences for your father, possibly prison time, Amara explained. The civil lawsuit would be focused on financial recovery but would still become public record. A private settlement would keep things quieter but might feel less like justice. I twisted Grandma Eleanor's camera pendant between my fingers, considering. What would the settlement terms look like? We would demand the original $200,000, plus compound interest for 3 years, compensation for lost business opportunities, and legal fees, Mr. Winters said. Likely around $350,000 total. And what about the others? Eric and Melissa benefited from my money too. Amara nodded. We can include them as defendants in a civil case, especially if we find evidence they knew about the fraud. For a settlement, we can demand they contribute proportionally. As we discussed the details, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from my family, pleas from my mother, demands from my father, a surprisingly humble request from Melissa to talk, and nothing from Eric. I ignored them all. There's something else you should know, Mr. Winters said hesitantly. Your grandmother left one more surprise. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was documentation for another account, a secret investment portfolio Eleanor had established decades ago, separate from the family business. She called it her insurance policy against Richard's schemes, Mr. Winters explained. It was to remain untouched until you either received your intended inheritance or discovered the truth about its diversion. The current value is approximately $750,000. I gasped, my hands trembling as I reviewed the documents. She had this all along? And never told anyone? Eleanor was a shrewd businesswoman, Mr. Winters smiled sadly. She learned after your grandfather's death that keeping some assets completely separate from Richard's knowledge was necessary. This portfolio was her personal project, high-risk investments that paid off remarkably well over time. So even if I never discovered what my family did, You would still eventually receive this, on your 35th birthday. But given recent events, the contingency clause has been triggered for immediate distribution. Tears welled in my eyes. Even now, Grandma Eleanor was looking out for me, making sure I would be okay regardless of what happened with my family. Your grandmother wanted you to know your worth isn't tied to their approval, Amara said gently. But she also believed in accountability. The question now is, what form of accountability do you want to pursue? Before I could answer, Mr. Winter's assistant knocked and entered with an urgent message. My father had arrived in the lobby, demanding to speak with us. You don't have to see him, Mr. Winters assured me. I took a deep breath, thinking of Grandma Eleanor's strength. No, I want to hear what he has to say. But on my terms, not his. 5 minutes later, my father was shown in. He looked haggard, as though he hadn't slept, his usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. For the first time, I noticed how he had aged, the man who had always seemed larger than life suddenly appearing vulnerable and old. Jessica, he began, his voice uncharacteristically humble. I've come to make things right. I said nothing, waiting. Mr. Winters and Amara flanked me, silent support against the man who had manipulated my life for years. I brought this, my father continued, placing a check on the table. $300,000. More than the original amount, accounting for interest and inconvenience. Inconvenience? I repeated, incredulous. Is that what you call stealing my inheritance and watching me struggle for 3 years while using my money to fund everyone else's dreams? My father winced. I made a mistake. I convinced myself I was protecting the family assets, making better decisions than you could at your age. I was wrong. This isn't just about money, I said. This is about trust. About family. About years of being made to feel less than because my dreams were different from yours. I know, he replied, and for once, he seemed sincere. The firm is investigating me now. Eric is furious, he says I put his career at risk. Your mother, he trailed off. Well, she's reevaluating many things. As she should, I said quietly. What do you want, Jessica? He asked, desperation edging into his voice. Tell me what it will take to keep this in the family, to avoid courts and publicity and prison. I looked at Mr. Winters and Amara, then back to my father. In that moment, I realized something important. This man who had loomed so large in my life, who had shaped my self-doubt and insecurities, had been reduced to begging. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I need time to consider my options, I said finally. But know this, whatever I decide will be about justice, not revenge. Grandma Eleanor deserves that distinction. My father nodded, defeated. As he turned to leave, I added, one more thing. I want a family meeting. Everyone present, including Maria who witnessed everything last night. I want the truth acknowledged before everyone. Is that all? He asked hoarsely. For now. After he left, I exhaled shakily, feeling both drained and strangely empowered. Amara squeezed my shoulder supportively. You did well, she said. Many people crumble when confronted by family, especially domineering parents. I still have to decide what to do, I replied. Criminal charges would destroy the family completely. A civil suit would drag on for months or years. Mr. Winters nodded. True justice sometimes requires difficult choices. But remember, whatever you decide, you're now financially secure thanks to Eleanor's foresight. Looking down at the documents detailing my grandmother's secret gift, I felt tears threatening again. All this time, she had been watching over me, planning, preparing. She had known my struggles intimately and created this safety net regardless of whether I ever discovered the truth about my stolen inheritance. I need to think, I said finally. As I gathered my things to leave, my phone buzzed with another text, this time from Melissa. I had no idea, Jess. I swear. Can we talk? Just us? For the first time, I considered that perhaps not everyone in my family had been actively complicit. Maybe some, like Melissa, had been manipulated too, kept in the dark about certain aspects while benefiting nonetheless. The situation was more complex than simply good versus evil, wronged versus wrongdoers. I texted back a simple tomorrow. Coffee shop on 5th, 10 a.m. This family drama was far from over, and the next steps I took would determine not just my financial future, but the very nature of my family relationships for decades to come. As I stepped out of the law office into the bright morning light, I felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the strength Grandma Eleanor had always seen in me, the strength I was finally beginning to recognize in myself. You know, this whole experience has been such a roller coaster of emotions. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to hear if any of you have ever discovered a family secret that changed everything. Has karma ever worked its magic in your family? Let me know in the comments below, and if this story is resonating with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life family dramas. I promise, the conclusion to this story will leave you speechless. The coffee shop on 5th Street was quiet when I arrived the next morning, deliberately 10 minutes early to compose my thoughts. I chose a corner table with a clear view of the door, ordered a latte, and waited. My sleep had been fitful, filled with dreams of Grandma Eleanor and fragmented family memories that seemed different in light of recent revelations. At exactly 10 a.m., Melissa walked in. My younger sister had always been the picture of confidence, straight-A student, medical school star, our parents' pride. Today, she looked uncertain, her usually perfect appearance slightly rumpled, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd slept as poorly as I had. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me after ordering her drink. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. The burden of explanation was hers, not mine. Melissa fidgeted with her napkin. "I didn't know about the trust fund, Jess. I swear. Dad always told us Grandma left everything to him to manage for the family's benefit. I never questioned it because, well, why would I?" "You never questioned anything they did," I observed. "That was always the difference between us." She flinched slightly. "I know how it looks. I was the golden child, the one who followed the path they laid out. Medical school was my dream, but I won't pretend I didn't benefit from being the favorite. While I struggled to build my business, working 3 jobs, you were getting your tuition paid with my money. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice." "If I had known, I would have refused," Melissa insisted, leaning forward. "You have to believe that." I studied my sister's face, trying to see beyond our years of complicated dynamics. "Why should I believe you now? You've always sided with them." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "Because I've seen the truth now. After you left last night, everything fell apart. Mom started screaming at Dad, demanding to know what else he's lied about. Eric kept trying to damage control everything, talking about family reputation and business implications. It was like watching masks fall away, revealing who they really are." She took a shaky breath. "I stayed up all night going through old financial records I found in Dad's study." "It's worse than you know, Jess." That caught my attention. "What do you mean?" Melissa opened her bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "Dad's been misappropriating funds for years, not just from Grandma's estate. There are discrepancies in Grandpa's will too, just like Mr. Winters mentioned. And I found evidence that he's been skimming from his clients' investment accounts." I flipped through the documents, stunned. "This is serious criminal activity." "I know," Melissa whispered. "He could go to prison for a long time." "And Eric," she hesitated. "What about Eric?" I pressed. "I think he knows. Some of these transfers required 2 signatures, Dad's and another family member's. Eric's name is on several of them. The revelation wasn't entirely surprising, but it still hurt. Eric had always been Dad's protégé, but I had hoped there was a line he wouldn't cross. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, closing the folder. Melissa's eyes met mine directly. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because Grandma believed in you, and she was right. And because," her voice broke slightly, "I want a chance to be your sister again. A real sister, not just someone who competed with you for our parents' approval." I sat back, processing her words. This could destroy Dad. And Eric. "They destroyed themselves," Melissa said with unexpected firmness. "What they did to you, to Grandma, to their clients, those were choices they made repeatedly." The waitress brought Melissa's coffee, creating a brief pause in our intense conversation. As she stirred in sugar, Melissa continued, "I've been thinking about my education. It was funded with stolen money, your money. I want to make it right." "How?" "You said yourself you're in debt from other expenses." "I've been offered a research position at Johns Hopkins. The salary is good, and I can set up a payment plan to reimburse you over time." She pulled out a handwritten document. "I've calculated what my portion would be, roughly 1/3 of your trust fund, since that's what Dad divided among us 3 kids. With interest." I was genuinely surprised. "You'd do that?" "It's not charity, Jess. It's obligation. What was done to you was wrong, and I benefited from it, knowingly or not." She hesitated, then added, "I also spoke to Maria this morning." "Our housekeeper?" "Why?" "Because she's worked for our family for 20 years. She's seen everything." Melissa leaned forward. "She told me Grandma Eleanor used to talk to her about you, how proud she was of your independence, your creativity. Maria said Grandma specifically told her to watch over Jessica after she was gone, but Dad threatened to fire her if she ever spoke to you directly. That explained why Maria had always given me warm, almost conspiratorial smiles during family gatherings, but never engaged in conversation beyond pleasantries." "Maria is willing to testify," Melissa added. "About conversations she overheard, documents she saw Dad hiding. She's been keeping her own records for years, apparently." I shook my head in disbelief. "Grandma had allies everywhere, didn't she?" "She knew Dad better than anyone," Melissa replied. "She prepared for this." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decisions hanging between us. Finally, I asked, "What do you think I should do?" Melissa considered carefully before answering. "If it were me? I'd file the criminal charges. Not for revenge, but because Dad's behavior is a pattern that will continue unless he's stopped. The financial fraud goes beyond just our family." "Mom will never forgive me," I said quietly. "Mom needs to wake up to the reality of who she married," Melissa retorted, surprising me with her vehemence. "She's chosen to look the other way for decades because it was comfortable." I studied my sister's face, seeing determination I'd never noticed before. Perhaps I wasn't the only one who had inherited Grandma Eleanor's strength. "I'll support whatever you decide," Melissa said, reaching hesitantly across the table to touch my hand. "And I'll testify if needed." It's time the truth came out, no matter how painful. In that moment, something shifted between us. The competitive dynamic that had defined our relationship since childhood began to transform into something new, an alliance based on truth and shared values rather than our parents' manipulations. "I need to think about next steps," I said, gathering the folder of evidence. "But, thank you for this. It can't have been easy." Melissa's smile was sad but genuine. "Doing the right thing rarely is. That's another lesson from Grandma I should have learned earlier." As we left the coffee shop, walking side by side for the first time in years, I realized that Grandma Eleanor's true legacy wasn't just financial security, it was the chance to rebuild my family on a foundation of honesty, even if that meant losing some members while gaining deeper connections with others. 3 days later, I sat in Mr. Winter's conference room alongside Amara Chen, Melissa, and surprisingly, Maria, our family's longtime housekeeper who had become an unexpected ally. Before us lay stacks of documents, the evidence of my father's financial misdeeds extending far beyond my inheritance, affecting family members, clients, and business partners alike. Based on everything we've compiled, Amara explained, we have enough evidence for both criminal charges and a comprehensive civil suit. The question remains, how do you want to proceed, Jessica? Everyone looked at me expectantly. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of revelations and difficult conversations. My mother had called repeatedly, alternating between tearful pleas to keep this in the family and angry accusations that I was destroying everything they had built. Eric had sent a single text message, "You have no idea what you're doing. Back off before it's too late." My father had maintained radio silence after his failed settlement attempt. I took a deep breath, thinking of Grandma Eleanor's words about justice versus revenge. "I want to file criminal charges for the financial fraud against clients," I said firmly. "That goes beyond family matters into professional ethics and public harm. But for our family issues, the manipulation of Grandma's will, I propose a different approach." Amara raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "A family reckoning," I said. "A meeting with everyone present, including the evidence. I want the truth acknowledged fully before any settlement is discussed. And I want specific terms." Mr. Winters nodded encouragingly. "Let's hear them." "First, complete restitution of my $200,000 plus fair interest and compensation for delayed career opportunities. We calculated approximately $350,000 total." I glanced at Melissa, who nodded in agreement with the figure. "Second, Melissa has offered to repay her portion over time, which I accept." My sister gave me a small, grateful smile. "Third," I continued, "I want my father to resign from his position at the investment firm and disclose his actions to the partners. His career in finance should end, given his breaches of trust. That's non-negotiable." "And Eric?" Mr. Winters asked. "If the evidence confirms he knowingly participated in the fraud, the same applies to him. If he was merely negligent or ignorant, he needs to acknowledge that publicly within the family and accept whatever professional consequences come from the firm's internal investigation." Amara made notes as I spoke. "These are significant demands, but supportable given the evidence." "And if they refuse?" "Then we proceed with both criminal and civil actions, making everything public," I stated, surprising myself with my certainty. "This isn't about money anymore. It's about accountability." Maria, who had been quietly observing until now, spoke up. "Miss Eleanor would be proud of you, Jessica. She always said you had a good heart but a strong spine when needed." Her words warmed me. "Thank you, Maria. For everything." "What about your mother?" Mr. Winters asked gently. "She wasn't directly involved in the financial misconduct from what we can determine." I sighed. "My mother chose willful ignorance for decades. She benefited from these actions while watching me struggle. Her consequences will be social and emotional, living with the truth about the husband and family life she's idealized for so long." With my decision made, events moved quickly. Mr. Winters arranged the family meeting for the following evening at his office, neutral territory. My father initially refused to attend, but when presented with the choice between a private reckoning or public charges, he reluctantly agreed. The atmosphere in the conference room that evening was thick with tension. My parents arrived together, though they sat at opposite ends of the table. My mother looked like she'd aged years in a week, her usually perfect makeup unable to hide the strain. My father maintained his businesslike facade, but his hands trembled slightly. Eric came alone, his typical confidence dimmed, eyes darting nervously around the room. Melissa sat beside me, a united front that clearly surprised our parents. Mr. Winters began formally. We're here to address serious matters concerning the Eleanor Morgan estate and subsequent financial irregularities. Jessica has evidence that would support both criminal and civil actions but has offered this private resolution as an alternative. For the next 2 hours, we methodically presented the evidence, the doctored will amendment, the video of my father pressuring Grandma Eleanor while she was medicated, Maria's witness testimony about conversations and hidden documents, and the paper trail of financial misappropriation that extended well beyond my inheritance. With each revelation, my father seemed to physically shrink in his chair. Eric's face cycled through emotions, defensiveness, anger, and finally, as the evidence mounted against him, resignation. My mother wept quietly, her perfect world crumbling around her. When we finished presenting, silence filled the room. Finally, my father spoke, his voice hollow. "What are your terms?" I laid them out clearly: full financial restitution, his resignation from the investment firm, acknowledgement of his actions to all family members, and Eric's accountability depending on his level of involvement. "And if I agree?" my father asked. "Then the family matters remain private," I replied. "But the client fraud will still be reported to the proper authorities." "That's not negotiable." Eric slammed his hand on the table. "You can't be serious. Do you have any idea what this will do to the family name? To the business?" "I'm perfectly serious," I met his gaze steadily. "And yes, I understand the consequences. The question is, do you understand the consequences of what you and Dad have done?" My mother finally found her voice. "Jessica, please. We can work this out without destroying everything we've built. Family should stand together." "Family shouldn't steal from each other," Melissa interjected sharply. "Family shouldn't lie and manipulate and watch one member struggle while benefiting from what was stolen from them." My mother turned to Melissa, shocked at her rebellion. "You too? After everything we've done for you? You mean after everything you did with Jessica's money?" Melissa retorted. "I'm paying back every cent of my portion. Are you willing to do the same with yours, Mom?" The confrontation continued for another hour: accusations, denials, bargaining, and finally, as the evidence proved insurmountable, acceptance. My father agreed to all terms, his fight finally gone. Eric, after attempting several more defensive maneuvers, eventually acknowledged his awareness of at least some of the financial improprieties. "I didn't know everything," he insisted, "but yes, I signed documents I should have questioned. I looked the other way when things didn't add up." By the meeting's end, legal documents had been drawn up for all parties to sign: payment schedules, confidentiality agreements about family matters, and formal acknowledgments of wrongdoing. My father would resign the following morning, citing personal reasons. The evidence of client fraud would be submitted to regulatory authorities by Mr. Winter's firm, not directly by me. As everyone prepared to leave, my father approached me, his expression unreadable. "You've won, Jessica. Are you satisfied now?" I looked at him, this man who had loomed so large in my life, now revealed as deeply flawed and morally compromised. "This isn't about winning, Dad. It's about truth. Something I learned from Grandma. Eleanor always did think she knew best," he said bitterly. "In this case, she did," I replied simply, turning away from him to join Melissa, who waited by the door. As we left the building together, I felt neither triumph nor sorrow, but rather a complex mixture of relief, grief, and something that felt surprisingly like freedom. The family I had known was irrevocably changed, but perhaps a more honest one could eventually take its place. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have anticipated. The financial restitution came through as agreed, allowing me to finally launch my photography studio in a renovated industrial space downtown. With Grandma Eleanor's secret investment portfolio and my recovered inheritance, I had more than enough capital to create the business I'd always envisioned. The consequences for my father were significant but not as devastating as they might have been. The investment firm conducted an internal investigation after his resignation, discovering the full extent of his misconduct. Rather than face public charges, the firm opted to quietly reimburse affected clients and institute stricter oversight protocols. My father avoided prison but was barred from working in financial services again. His reputation in business circles was irreparably damaged. Eric fared somewhat better. The investigation found he had been negligent rather than actively complicit in most cases. He was demoted and placed on probation at the firm but allowed to continue working under close supervision. The experience humbled him in ways I wouldn't have thought possible. My parents' marriage became another casualty of the truth. My mother filed for divorce 2 months after the family meeting, unable to reconcile her image of her perfect husband with the reality of his actions. She moved to a condo in Florida, maintaining minimal contact with any of us as she rebuilt her identity and social circle. The most unexpected development was my evolving relationship with Melissa. Our alliance during the crisis evolved into a genuine friendship. She followed through on her promise to repay her portion of the misappropriated funds, sending monthly payments from her research position salary. More importantly, we began to know each other as adults, free from our parents' manipulative dynamics. On a crisp autumn morning, exactly 6 months after the family confrontation, I prepared for the grand opening of Eleanor's photography studio. The name was my tribute to Grandma Eleanor, who had made it all possible. The studio specialized in portrait photography that captured people's authentic selves rather than polished personas, another lesson I'd learned through this journey. As I arranged the final details for the opening reception, Melissa arrived early, carrying a package wrapped in simple brown paper. "Thought you might want to open this before everyone else arrives," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen before, Grandma Eleanor in her garden, looking directly at the camera with a knowing smile. I recognized the setting but not the image itself. "Where did you get this?" I asked, running my fingers over the frame. "Maria found it while cleaning out the family home," Melissa explained. "It was hidden in Grandma's old study with a note saying it should be given to you when you came into your own. Mom's selling the house, so Maria's been sorting through everything." The timing was perfect, exactly when I was opening the studio that represented my independent path. Somehow, Grandma Eleanor had anticipated this moment years ago. "She believed in you so much, Jess," Melissa said softly. And she was right too. I hung the photograph in a place of honor near the entrance, where Grandma Eleanor could symbolically welcome everyone who entered. When guests arrived for the opening reception, the photograph became a conversation piece, allowing me to share parts of my grandmother's legacy. Mr. Winters and Amara came to support me, as did several former clients who had become friends during my struggling years. Maria attended proudly, her loyalty to Grandma Eleanor extending now to me. To my surprise, Eric appeared briefly, awkwardly presenting me with an expensive camera lens as a peace offering. Our relationship remained strained but civil, with tentative steps toward reconciliation. My father did not come, nor did I expect him to. We had exchanged only a few terse messages since the confrontation. His absence was simultaneously a wound and a freedom, a complex emotion I was still learning to navigate. As I gave a short speech thanking everyone for their support, I felt Grandma Eleanor's presence strongly. "This studio represents not just my passion for photography," I told the gathered crowd, "but also the power of believing in yourself even when others don't." My grandmother taught me that our worth isn't determined by others' perceptions, and that justice often arrives in unexpected ways. The reception was a success, with several bookings made and positive coverage from local arts publications. As the last guests departed, I found myself alone in the studio, surrounded by my photographs and the tangible results of my long-delayed dreams. Looking at Grandma Eleanor's photograph, I spoke aloud to her. "You planned all of this, didn't you? Not just the financial safeguards, but this whole journey of discovering the truth and finding my strength." Though no answer came, I felt a sense of peace and completion. The past year had been painful in many ways, but necessary. Family myths had been shattered, uncomfortable truths exposed, and genuine connections formed in their place. Most importantly, I had discovered my own capacity for standing firm in the face of manipulation and deceit, for seeking justice without descending into vindictiveness. In the end, my grandmother's revenge wasn't really revenge at all, it was protection, foresight, and a deep belief in justice being served in its own time. She had ensured that the truth would emerge, not to destroy the family but to transform it into something more authentic, even if smaller and altered from its original form. As I turned out the studio lights that evening, I felt not just closure, but opening, the beginning of a life built on truth rather than pretense, on earned trust rather than obligatory loyalty. What remained of my family was changed irrevocably, but perhaps it was stronger for being real, for acknowledging human failings and the possibility of redemption through accountability. Grandma Eleanor's greatest gift hadn't been the financial security, though that made my dreams possible. Her true legacy was teaching me that family isn't defined by blood alone, but by honesty, respect, and genuine support. Some relatives are given by birth, others, like the allies who stood by me during the darkest moments, are chosen and all the more precious for it. What a journey this has been to share with all of you. I hope my story has resonated with some of you who might have faced your own family challenges or difficult truths. Has karma ever played out in your family in unexpected ways? Have you ever had to stand up for what's right, even when it was painful? I'd truly love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story touched you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and life lessons. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is worth it, even when it's hard. Thank you so much for listening to my family's complicated journey, and remember, sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about getting even, but about living well and truthfully.